Ever heard of the DC-10? For a while, this plane was the future of air travel. A wide-body giant promising comfort and long-range flights for the masses. But its story is also one of tragedy, controversy, and ultimately redemption. It's a story that cost billions of dollars and, more importantly, hundreds of lives. But in doing so, it changed the way we think about flying forever. This is the $10 billion lesson that reshaped aviation safety. In the late 1960s, the race was on. Boeing had the 747, the undisputed queen of the skies. McDonnell Douglas needed a competitor, something big, but more versatile. Their answer was the DC-10. It was a marvel of engineering. 3 engines, a spacious cabin, and capable of flying routes the 747 was too big for. Airlines loved it. By the early 70s, DC-10s were crisscrossing the globe, a symbol of modern air travel. Passengers loved the wide, twin-aisle layout. It felt less like a tube and more like a room in the sky. Everything seemed perfect. But a critical design flaw was hiding in plain sight, a flaw centered on something you probably don't even think about when you fly: the cargo door. The DC-10's cargo door was designed to open outwards. This saves precious cargo space inside, but it also means the door has to fight against the immense pressure difference at high altitudes. To keep it secure, a set of heavy-duty locking pins were supposed to engage. The problem was the mechanism. It was complex, and it was possible for a baggage handler to think the door was locked when, in fact, the pins weren't fully engaged. The cockpit had a warning light, but it was tied to the locking handle, not the pins themselves. So you could have a closed handle, a light that's off, but a door that's a ticking time bomb. The first major warning came in 1972. American Airlines Flight 96 was climbing out of Detroit when its rear cargo door blew open. The sudden, violent decompression caused a section of the cabin floor to collapse, severing crucial flight control cables that ran underneath. The pilots, Captain Bryce McCormick and his crew, were suddenly fighting a plane that didn't want to listen. Through sheer skill and a bit of luck, using differential thrust from the wing-mounted engines, they managed to wrestle the crippled jet back to the ground. Miraculously, everyone survived. An investigation followed. The National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, identified the cargo door flaw. They issued a series of urgent recommendations. They said the door locking system needed to be redesigned and made foolproof. They also recommended adding vents between the cargo hold and the passenger cabin. Why vents? Because if the door ever failed again, these vents would allow the pressure to equalize, preventing the cabin floor from collapsing and severing the control cables. This was a critical, life-saving fix. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. The head of the FAA at the time, John H. Schaffer, reached what was called a gentleman's agreement with McDonnell Douglas. Instead of issuing a legally binding airworthiness directive that would have forced all DC-10s to be fixed immediately, the FAA allowed the manufacturer to issue voluntary service bulletins. Not all planes were modified. The sense of urgency was lost. It was a fateful and ultimately devastating decision. 2 years later, on March 3, 1974, the nightmare scenario happened. Turkish Airlines Flight 981 took off from Paris. It was a DC-10 that had not received the mandatory door modifications. As it climbed, the rear cargo door blew out. Just like in the Detroit incident, the floor collapsed, severing all hydraulic lines to the tail. This time, the pilots had no control whatsoever. The massive jet dove into the Ermenonville forest outside Paris. All 346 people on board were killed. It was, at the time, the deadliest air disaster in history. The public outcry was immense. The investigation revealed the horrifying truth. This was not a freak accident. It was a preventable disaster. The exact failure predicted by the NTSB 2 years earlier had occurred. The gentleman's agreement had led directly to 346 deaths. Lawsuits against McDonnell Douglas and the FAA piled up, with eventual settlements reaching into the hundreds of millions of dollars, which in today's money would be well over $1 billion. This time, the FAA acted decisively. They issued an emergency airworthiness directive, grounding DC-10s worldwide until the cargo door locking system was completely redesigned and the floor vents were installed. The fix was, in hindsight, relatively simple, but it came too late. The DC-10's reputation was in tatters. Flyers were scared. Many called it the death cruiser. Just as the DC-10 was starting to recover, disaster struck again. In 1979, American Airlines Flight 191 was taking off from Chicago's O'Hare Airport. Just as it lifted off the runway, its left engine and pylon completely detached from the wing, flying up and over the top. The plane rolled sharply to the left and crashed into a field just moments later. All 271 people on board, plus 2 on the ground, were killed. It remains the deadliest single-plane accident on U.S. soil. Once again, the DC-10 fleet was grounded. The initial fear was another design flaw, but the investigation uncovered something different, and in many ways, more disturbing. The problem wasn't the plane's design, but its maintenance. To save time and money, some airlines, including American, had developed a shortcut for removing the engines. Instead of taking the engine off the pylon first, and then the pylon from the wing, they were using forklifts to remove the entire assembly as one unit. This procedure was not approved by McDonnell Douglas and put immense stress on the pylon's attachment points. Over time, this improper maintenance caused a tiny stress fracture, which grew with every flight until it finally failed catastrophically on Flight 191. This tragedy exposed a massive gap in the aviation industry. It showed that even a well-designed plane could be made deadly by poor maintenance practices. The fallout was enormous. The FAA ramped up its oversight of airline maintenance procedures, making them far more stringent and standardized. Communication between manufacturers and airlines was fundamentally changed. From then on, manufacturers had to be directly involved in approving any significant maintenance procedure. You couldn't just invent a shortcut in your own hangar anymore. The total cost of the groundings, lawsuits, and lost sales from both the cargo door and the engine incidents is estimated to have cost McDonnell Douglas and the airlines close to $10 billion in today's money. So what is the legacy of the DC-10? It's complicated. On one hand, it has a story of tragic failure, of a design flaw that was warned about and a maintenance shortcut that proved fatal. But on the other hand, the DC-10 became a catalyst for the most significant safety revolution in modern aviation. The lessons learned from these disasters are written in the regulations that keep us safe today. Every time you fly, you are protected by the legacy of the DC-10, the concept of human factors in design, making systems that are hard for people to operate incorrectly, came directly from the cargo door fiasco. Redundant flight control systems, ensuring that one failure point can't bring down a plane, were reinforced. And the rigorous, standardized maintenance oversight we now take for granted was born from the wreckage of Flight 191. After the fixes, the DC-10 actually went on to have a very good safety record, flying for decades as both a passenger and cargo plane. Many are still flying today as FedEx cargo freighters, a testament to the strength of the underlying airframe. The story of the DC-10 is a powerful reminder that progress in aviation safety has often been paid for at a terrible price. It's a $10 billion lesson in engineering, oversight, and human fallibility. It transformed the industry from a reactive one, which fixed problems after crashes, to a proactive one, dedicated to preventing them from ever happening. And that is why, despite its troubled past, the DC-10 may be one of the most important airplanes ever built. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of aviation. Fly safe.